So maybe we could start with how that idea for the book came to you.
Yeah, thank you. I mean, the idea came from, and as is written in the foreword, a book that my father received in 1946. It was a Sunday school book called "If Jesus Came to My House," and this is very much a tribute to, an homage to that book. It's in the same style, and the illustrations are in the same style. Joan Gale Thomas wrote this original book, and although I've never been religious, but this book really struck a chord with me as a kid, and I would often ask to see it. And it just, portrayed this little boy who opens his front door to find Jesus, also as a little boy, is there, and they spend the day together, and they play together, and they get to know each other. And it just always struck me as this bewitching idea to be able to spend an afternoon with a hero that you could never actually meet through time or circumstance, and that always stayed with me. And then it was 2 years ago that I thought of this idea of Nick Drake coming to my house. I think it was more of a joke when I first came up with the idea, but I mentioned it to my son, who's a massive Nick Drake fan, and as soon as I said if Nick Drake came to my house, I saw him sort of choke up a bit and tears spring to his eyes, and I realised that it wasn't a joke, and it needed a bit more care to be taken over it, and it was that emotional response from my son, who is the person who opens the door in the book. That's who I've drawn into the book. It was that emotional response from him that made me realise it was possibly a good idea to do. Yeah.
Is it the type of thing where you had Joan's book in your head first, and Nick was the kind of natural fit for it, or did you have Nick in your head first, and Joan's book became the kind of vehicle to express the story you wanted to tell about her, or was it a bit of both?
It was certainly not that I wanted to do a story about somebody turning up, and I racked my brains to think who could turn up. It was, but it sort of all came together at the same time. I don't really understand. I can't remember the point when I thought of it, but a few of my friends even I described it to them, and they said, "Oh, why Nick Drake?" And that kind of took me back. I didn't understand the question. It was why not Nick Drake? I mean, it wasn't like I'd gone through a list of people and decided who was the best fit. I was saying to someone else, I'm as big a fan of Kurt Cobain and Nirvana, but if Kurt Cobain came to my house, he's different from Kyle. And I'd have to, I don't know, presumably go out and find some heroin for him. That wasn't nearly as sweet a book. There's this thing that's possibly, vanity where you hope that you and your heroes would get on like a house on fire, and that's the fantasy in this book, that Nick Drake would come around and we'd have so much in common that we'd become instantly best friends. It's a fantasy like that. Recommended to me for a long time before I got around to listening to it, because it was friends of mine who are very much into their music and know a lot more about music than I do, that recommended his music to me and said I would like it, and it just seemed like homework, it was going to be really impenetrable and as if someone had recommended, an art house movie that you have to go and watch, and when you're ever going to find time to do that. But eventually I was cornered and forced to listen to it, and that was, I think, 1997, and I was sharing a flat at the Edinburgh Festival with someone, and they finally played it to me, and of course, you know, when you listen to it, it's like, yeah, you realise it's not homework, and they were recommended it for a very good reason, because, yeah, of course I was going to love it. And yeah, I listened, and there's only 3 albums, so it's not like there's a massive back catalogue that you have to wade through and find the good bits. They're 3 perfect albums as far as I'm concerned, and you can listen to them in an afternoon, and that's his whole body of work. Yeah.
Where did he play you first?
It was Pink Moon, his 3rd album, which is, and I think he played me that because it's so stripped back. It's just Nick and his guitar, 1 piano track on the title song, but yeah, so it's very personal and yeah.
I totally hear you on the kind of pressure of recommendation, and you have to kind of be in the right place to receive the recommendation or to receive the kind of new experience, don't you? Because and otherwise it's just not going to connect.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
And of course, you not only wrote, but you also illustrated the book.
Yes.
And the illustrations are gorgeous.
Thank you.
Your love of visual art goes way back from when you were young, no?
Yeah, I mean, I've always drawn. When I was at school, at primary school, I was the best drawer in the class. Thank you. Which is, that's currency when you're a primary school age. And yeah, so I went through my whole career, people telling me how good I was at drawing, and so I just assumed that I was going to go to art college and become an illustrator or an artist, graphic artist, something. And I left. I went to interviews at art school, and they said no. 3 times I went to three interviews at art school for foundation courses, which surely anyone can get on an art foundation course, and I just couldn't get on. And I blame other people. I blame I went to quite a sort of academic grammar school, and they didn't have a good art department, and nobody told me what I needed to do to get into art school. In hindsight, I'm happy with the way my career has gone, but at the time I was devastated. I couldn't believe that I'd spent all my childhood career being told how good I was at drawing, and then the people that mattered said, no, actually you're not that good at drawing.
Well, you showed them.
But yeah, I mean, it's lovely now that the career I chose has opened other doors, and that now I can illustrate a book and have it published. So yeah, that's wonderful.
And how did you approach the art for this particular book?
I meant to bring the If Jesus Came to My House book along with me, but it's very much a tribute to Joan Gale Thomas, who wrote and illustrated that book, and they're very simple 1940s inspired illustrations. I wanted to do them as block cuts, block prints or lino prints, but it would have taken me 2 years to do that. So they're drawn in the style of prints, but yeah.
And so I thought maybe we could just talk a bit about ghosts, and maybe starting with what kind of ghost is Nick to you in this? Or maybe why is he a ghost?
I mean, I've always had imaginary conversations with my heroes, and Dickens is another one that I've said before, that when I walk around London, I quite often do so with the ghost of Charles Dickens at my side, and we point stuff out to each other. He points out to me what a slum Seven Dials was when he was around, and I don't know, there's something fascinating to me about, as it's time travel as well, hooking up with someone from the past and comparing our worlds. And yeah, I mean, I was born a couple of years before Nick Drake died. In fact, the month that I was born, he moved into a house into a flat that's about 100 yards from where I live now. I would have been brought to see my grandparents when I was first born, and I would have been within half a mile of Nick Drake. So yeah, that's my. I don't know. For some reason, I cling on to that. Like I almost knew him. I don't know. It's a wish. Yeah.
I think that's actually that's kind of the perfect word, isn't it? It feels like a wish.
Yes. Yeah. The character of Lance has a gig at a folk club, and I wanted his song to be sort of amateurish and sort of sixth form, but with a heart to it. And I thought I could at least do that, but I couldn't, and so I had to get a friend of mine to write this not very good song. I couldn't even write a not very good song, but. So I was trying to learn the guitar, trying and reaching a ceiling which I could never break through. And then my son, as the day my son got better than me at a guitar, I put my guitar aside and I haven't picked it up since. And I honestly mean it when I say it's a weight off my shoulders, because now I can just enjoy other people's music, and it's an alchemy that I don't understand. And I'm happy to, I sort of associate myself with musicians through, in Detectorists, I asked my friend Johnny Flynn to write the music, and I just sort of gave him some simple instructions, told him the concept of the show, and he came back with all this magic, which I get a lot of credit for. And with Worzel Gummidge, the Unthanks were another favourite band of mine, and I went to them and asked if they would consider doing the music for Worzel Gummidge, and they did. Yes, and maybe this is an unashamed way or shameful way of associating myself with Nick Drake. I will forever be mentioned in the same sentences. Oh, it's awful.
To kind of keep to the topic of commonalities in your work, in your talk with Guy Garvey last night, he brought up certain threads that kind of go through a lot of it. And one was your fascination with the English countryside and folklore, and obviously the British kind of folk tradition that Nick and Fairport Convention and the like fit really perfectly in there. But you didn't grow up in the countryside, so
no.
Where did the fascination come from for you?
I grew up in deepest suburbia in Dartford in Kent, but it was only a short hop to the countryside. I also used to go to Africa every year. My mum's sister married a Rhodesian guy. Rhodesia became Zimbabwe, obviously, and my dad worked for British Airways. So although we weren't wealthy, we used to have these incredible holidays every year when my friends were riding their bikes round and round cul-de-sacs for the summer. I was off in deepest, darkest Africa and having adventures on a tobacco farm with my cousin. That's where I learned a love of nature. But the British countryside, I've always been fascinated. I've always loved wildlife and the natural world. A big awakening came when I did a play, again 10 years ago more, called Jerusalem in the West End. And that explored English rural life and lots of folklore and magic. The rehearsal process. The director was Ian Rickson. He loves his rehearsals are very in depth, and you immerse yourself in the subject and study and visit places and that. A lot of stuff was awoken in me from that process, and that's where Detectorists came from after Jerusalem.
Every time you listen to one of his albums, and then you can share those albums with friends, and to me, this feels like where we kind of get to what the book is really about in a way, that kind of connection that you're making with an artist and with a great work of art, and your ability to communicate that passion to others.
Absolutely, but you know the template for this book was the book about Jesus, and it's the end of that book. You know, that finishes up with, I know Jesus can't come around to my house, but I can go to church, and I can do good things. I can do good deeds, so it's a religious thing, really. It's Nick Drake can't come to my house, but I can share his records, and I can and share this gift with other people and bring him into their lives. Yeah, that's right. You were asking me why, and it just fits so well with that religious experience, I suppose. I found this love, and I can share it with others and bring love into their life as well. Yeah.
Well, and
I'm having a moment. Sorry. I don't really know. I hope that it brings some people to. Most people who are going to buy this and read it will already know of Nick Drake. But if it brings some more people to his music and to appreciate his music, that would be great. Otherwise, I'm not really sure what I hope.
Well, that's part of the joys of kind of creating art, is that you get to kind of see how people respond to it.
Yeah.
That's out of your control.
Yeah. I mean, the original book that was inspired by it, I used to go back time and time again and look through it. You know, I hope it's not something that people just flick through and that will be it. I hope it is something you might come back to and be reminded of, come back and read it again.
I'm sure that Joan didn't have somebody writing a version of it with Nick Drake in her mind when she put hers out into
Right.
the world.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, I want to leave time to have questions for everybody. I thought we'd end with a quick rapid fire session, if that's okay. I got 10 questions to answer, and they're just simple choices, right? So. I don't know why I decided to end like this, but I'm committing.
Will any of them get me cancelled?
No. Hopefully not. All right, let's start. Nevermind or In Utero?
In Utero. I've got the album cover tattooed on my back. Took 8 hours.
Oh my goodness.
I promise you.
Great Expectations or David Copperfield?
Great Expectations.
Yeah.
Yes. Come on.
Get in there.
Dogs or cats?
Neither.
And actually, I'm gonna pause for a second because I forgot to ask you about your tortoise. Because your tortoise shows up a couple of times in here.
It does.
And I want to hear more about your tortoise.
I have a long history with tortoises. When I was 15, I inherited a pair of tortoises that we could account for. They were 60 years old when I inherited them at the age of 15, and they're still alive, and they still lay a clutch of eggs every year. They're an old married couple, and they're with my parents, but I have one of their offspring, George, who's 22, a young whippersnapper, and who follows me around, and he features in the book. And today was a red letter day because he went into his fridge today. Back in the day, they used to get put in a box in the garage, but these days tortoises get put in their own special fridges.
Right, back to rapid fire. Summer or autumn?
Summer, absolutely, all the way.
Comedy or drama?
Comedy drama.
Okay. Clotted cream first or jam first?
Jam first, cream on top. What does that make it?
Makes you right.
That's a winner. Tea or coffee?
That's a difficult one. Big fan of both. Oh, if I had to choose, I'd go with coffee.
Okay.
Oh, controversial. Nothing if not slightly controversial.
Theater or cinema?
Theatre, yeah.
Doctor Who or Star Wars?
Star Wars.
And finally, Time Has Told Me or Place to Be?
Place to Be.
Nice.
That was one. Yeah, that was the one that first made me. I listened to the lyrics of that, and that's what made me fall in love.
Fantastic. I feel like we know so much more about you now. Well, should we open it up to questions?
Yes, please.
You've written for a few different mediums now. What's your approach to writing? Is it different for depending on what you're working in, or do you find there's some commonality?
Can everyone hear the question?
Yeah.
The question is, do you have different approaches when you write for different mediums?
Don't know if I do. What I know is that I love writing, and if I have a writing project to do, it's the best, and I have to have the whole day free. Like even one Zoom meeting at 3:00. That's the day ruined writing wise. So I have to have the whole day to myself, and it probably takes me a couple of hours to get into the frame of mind. So I'll be fiddling around, pottering around, and slowly get into it, and then I'm focused and I'm writing. And it's a luxury to write. And on a day when it's flowing, it's joyous. It doesn't always, in fact, it doesn't always flow, but that's it's the part of the process that I enjoy the most. I don't know if there's different ways I approach different mediums. No, I don't think so. I have a shed, I have a safe space with lots of other things around, and I write in short bursts. I write in 10-15 minute bursts, and then I'll have another project on the side, a making or a drawing thing, and then I'll swap between the two, and I'll be up and walking around and speaking words out loud and acting the bits out. But I love it. I absolutely love the writing process. Yeah.
I've just read it.
While he was being interviewed. It's rude.
And I was thinking it could be a really nice book to use perhaps with children, maybe where there's been a death in the family, perhaps a sibling or a parent, and maybe the child's at that age where they kind of just remember the lost person, but perhaps not very well, but there's still that aura of specialness about them that remains. And I just wondered whether you'd had any thoughts about the different ways maybe it could be used.
I hadn't thought of that. It's really beautiful. Thank you. I'm sorry, people probably didn't hear. This lady was saying that it could be used as a tool for bereavement if somebody has lost someone, and a way of talking about them. I never thought of it like that, but thank you. Yeah, that's a really beautiful thought. I hadn't thought about any. It's so strange. I'm still sort of trying to get to grips with what even it is, and it's sort of masquerading as a children's book, but it isn't a children's book. It's a nursery rhyme, a sort of a fake nursery rhyme. No, that's lovely.
Loss jumped out at me. That feeling of
Yes.
loss. Really.
Yeah, I've never really thought about the sense of loss in it, but it's a longing. It's a longing to connect with someone that you can't and who's gone. Hopefully not in a maudlin way, but in a joyous way, And no, thank you. That's really food for thought. Thanks.
Simple, quick question. Pub?
Go on.
Oh, that was my question.
In the back of the check shirt.
Yeah, a twofold question, Mackenzie. Have you spoken to Drake's estate at all? Have they been responsive?
I haven't, no. And in fact, I'm meeting Gabrielle Drake, Nick's sister, next week. I'm doing a talk at the South Bank there's a panel of us. There's Joe Boyd, Nick's producer, and Gabrielle, his sister, and Rick Morton Jack, who wrote the biography. I'm desperately nervous about it. In fact, these other people knew him, worked with him, and I haven't spoken to them, but.
The second question
I mean, hopefully, hopefully because it is such a love letter to him that nobody's gonna, object to that. Sorry, go on.
The second part is, I think the estate, I can't really speak for them, have always maintained there isn't a biopic to be made because the end is too bleak. But you've got a tall, handsome, acting, guitar-playing son. Can you see anything there?
It's really funny you should say that, because I was looking at my son the other day and he was playing a Nick Drake song, and I actually thought, God, if anyone could play Nick Drake, you could play him.
Yeah.
I don't know. I'm not sure. I don't know. It feels almost too sacred to make the people that know and love Nick Drake's music hold it so close to their heart that, yeah, to see him portrayed on screen would be an odd thing. Yeah.
Excellent.
Interesting question. Thank you.
Right here in the front.
First, thank you for Detectorists.
Yes.
American.
Woo! Thank you.
And New Age Girl, I think, is a brilliant song.
I wish I'd written it.
I'm just connecting the dots. You had talked about having a shed, maybe once or twice. And you were longing for a shed in Detectorists, and of course, Nick Drake's first album was a song called
Man
Man
in a
in
Shed.
a Shed.
Yeah.
I was wondering if there was some subliminal.
The magical thing in the shed.
And yeah, of course. Yeah, sheds are a big part of my life. Nothing if not rock and roll. My dad had a shed. There's something. It's I called it a safe place, and it is. It's a creative place. Yeah, that's what it is. It's not a nerdy thing. It's a creative place to make things and write things and create. But I have two sheds now. I mean, in Detectorists.
After two sheds, Jackson.
Thank you. I didn't realise when I was writing Detectorists that it was a gift from my dad, but it occurred to me afterwards, and of course this is, he adored it, and I realised that I'd written it. I think this is more a gift for Jude, who I've put into it, and I think it's for him, and you. Funnily enough, I'm doing Radio 4's Inheritance tracks in a few days' time, I think. And the one that I inherited, the track that I inherited, is Simon and Garfunkel. I didn't grow up in a musical house. There was never music on. Most people talk about always having music in the house, the radio on. My dad had a decorating tape. It was his mix cassette, that came out when he was decorating. So that's once or twice a year, literally. And there was the Nolan sisters, and a bit of John Denver, but there was Simon and Garfunkel on it, and those were the tracks, 2 or 3 tracks, Bridge Over Troubled Water, Sound of Silence, Feeling Groovy, and those are the ones that stuck out from that. So Simon and Garfunkel were a big part of my life, and sort of steered me towards folk music, and they look funny on that album. And so I think my grandparents had the Bridge Over Troubled Water album with that strange photo on the front where Paul Simon's holding an award, I think. And there's such opposites. And
It's the mule of a staircase.
oh, is it?
Yeah.
It looks like he's clutching some award that they've just
It's
won.
the metal mule of a staircase, because I recreated it with my brother for my sister's 70th birthday.
Thank you. That's great. But yeah, I always thought they were brilliant and looked funny, and so the baddies in Detectorists, I just thought it would be amusing if they They had this resemblance to Simon and Garfunkel, but didn't realise it. Yes. Thank you.
Thanks.
Sorry, you had a question, sir. Oh, chap behind you. In fact, yeah, white t-shirt. Sorry.
Yeah, that's all right. I take it I can go next. Fascinated by the idea of you saying it was a gift for Jude. My father actually was the person who introduced me to Nick Drake, funnily enough, because he was getting sick of me listening to Johnny Flynn all the time and said, you'd probably like Nick Drake. So I wondered if you actually had a memory of the first time you introduced Jude to music.
I know exactly when it was because, sorry, for people at the back, this gentleman was asking when I first introduced Nick Drake's music to my son, Jude. And it was when he was a newborn, and I had to, one of my tasks was the early morning, the 3 o'clock in the morning feed, and I used to feed him and play him music, and it was always Nick Drake music because it's soothing and sort of quite hypnotic. And yeah, I hoped that it would seep in and inspire him to be a musician and inspire a love of Nick Drake's music, and it totally worked because he's a Nick Drake aficionado and a brilliant musician. So yeah, that's the way to do it. Yeah.
I just wondered if you, this is a personal thing, so please feel free to say I don't want to answer this. I just wondered if you saw yourself as a tortured poet.
Oh no, I've always wanted to. Sorry, she asked if I saw myself as a tortured poet. No, it's funny. I even.
Reassuring. I'm so pleased you're not.
No, it's funny. The children's literature, the children's books that I used to read, I was always drawn to the ones where the children were really lonely and cruelly treated. And I wasn't lonely or cruelly treated, but I had this sort of longing to be sadder than I am. Yeah, I had this beautiful, idyllic childhood, but I was always drawn to books where, like James and the Giant Peach, or Danny the Champion of the World, to name two Roald Dahl books, where it was these kids were sad and lonely. I don't know what that is, and the musicians that I'm drawn to are the tragic ones. Yeah, I don't understand that, but no, I'm not a tortured artist myself.
Well, that feels like a great note to end on, actually.
Thank you very much.